are at quorum.
Awesome and amazing. Good to see you all, not in person, but I look forward to next month when I can blink and everybody's in the room. But also no shade to those that are with us virtually. Just there's a different kind of synergy that happens when we're in the room, and then we don't just stare at each other when we ask questions, because otherwise we do. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Committee meeting. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question, and mute when you are not speaking. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located at the information table and give it to a MAG staff person. If you are in the audience today, please remember to sign in at the information table. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table, unless you want to just pay for parking, then you can do that too. If you purchase a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assist devices are available from MAG staff. We will now ask Haley to proceed with a roll call. Please indicate you are here and your organization after Haley calls your name.
Thank you so much. Dawn Bogart.
Here, Dawn Bogart, Homeless Youth Connection.
Yeah. Vanessa Carthel. Allison Cook Davis.
Allison Cook Davis with Morrison Institute for Public Policy.
Great, thank you. Callie Lamers for Erin Cowan-Haig.
Callie Lamers, Save the Family.
Jessica Cruz. Kathy Dinolfi. Nicole Gibson.
Nicole Gibson, UMOM.
Thank you. Anne Marie Johnston.
Anne Marie with Community Bridges, present.
Christina Lopez. Marcy McFarland.
Marcy McFarland, Home Inc.
Jim McPherson.
Morning, Jim McPherson, PCA Social and Housing Advancement Committee. Thank you.
Jennifer Page.
Good morning, Jennifer Page, Mercy Care.
Gerardo Pena. Aaron Rain.
Good morning, Aaron Rain, City of Mesa.
Tyler Rosensteel.
Good morning, this is Ty Rosensteel with Solari representing HMIS and 211.
Patricia Scott Lopez.
Patty Scott Lopez, Arizona Complete Health.
Sarah Sims.
Good morning, Sarah Sims, Phoenix Elementary School District number 1.
Laura Scott Nicky. Nathan Smith.
Nathan Smith, Phoenix Rescue Mission.
Michelle Stokes.
Michelle Stokes, Behold Charities, good morning.
Christopher Wallace.
Christopher Wallace, Phoenix VA.
Emily Walsh.
Emily Walsh with Maricopa County, present.
And Chair Richard Cruz.
Richard Cruz, Human Services Candace, present.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss anybody? I don't know if anybody joined late. Okay, great. Thanks. Back to you, Chair.
Awesome. Consent agendas will approve multiple items at the same time. Committee members can always ask for an agenda item to be pulled off the consent agenda to be heard during the meeting, at which time staff can provide additional information, give a presentation, and answer any questions. Does any member of the committee have questions or comments on the consent agenda? Hearing none, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. First, is there discussion on the motion? Okay, so for committee members in the room, we will do a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay. Yay. There we go. Right. Any opposed? Hearing none. Okay, we will now have, for those joining remotely, we'll ask Haley to proceed with the roll call vote. Please indicate clearly how you vote, stating yay or nay after your name is called.
Thank you. Dawn Bogart.
Yay.
Vanessa Carthel. I see you on. I think you may be muted. I can't hear you, but I can see you. If you want to do a thumbs up, I'll allow it. Okay, Vanessa Carthel says yay. Allison Cook Davis,
Yay.
Callie Lamers for Aaron Cowan-Haig.
I'll abstain.
Thank you. Nicole Gibson,
Yay.
Anne Marie Johnston,
Yay.
Jim McPherson,
Aye.
Jen Page,
Yay.
Aaron Rain,
Yay.
Ty Rosensteel,
Yay.
Patty Scott Lopez,
Yay.
Sarah Sims, sorry.
Yay.
Laura Scott Nicky,
Yay.
Michelle Stokes,
Yeah.
Christopher Wallace,
Yay.
Emily Walsh,
Yay.
and back to you, Chair Cruz.
Awesome. So thank you. We will now move on to the next agenda item. We're churning along here. We're getting into the good juicy stuff though. So for updates, the written updates were included in the packet. Dylan will give the legislative update.
Thank you, Co-Chair Cruz. I will just speak briefly about some updates on the Housing Coalition's priority legislation, and then I'll move to a few other bills that they're currently tracking. And then after that, there'll be time for some questions. Might not be able to answer everything, but certainly some of it. First up, the Housing Trust Fund bill introduced by Senator Shope. That bill is here to adjust a few of the funding sources, sort of diversifying and making them more recurring. That bill has been assigned to two different committees in the Senate, Commerce and Appropriations, but it hasn't been placed on an agenda yet. The next bill is that teacherages bill introduced by Senator Kaiser. It was initially placed on the education agenda, but it was soon after assigned to the government committee instead. So currently we're just waiting to see that placed on another agenda. The next bill actually just had a pretty big update yesterday. This is the DES line item increase in the budget for the homeless coordination line item. That one was heard in Senate Appropriations yesterday, and it passed. And next up, the last Housing Coalition priority bill is the extension and increase of the LIHTC. It appears to have bipartisan support. It's been assigned to Ways and Means and Appropriations in the House, but it hasn't been placed on the agendas yet. So essentially for most of these, we are still in a holding period waiting to see those advance further. And then I did just want to mention two other bills that the Housing Coalition is keeping an eye on. First, we have it's kind of a double bill situation. They're very similar. This is the one related to earmarking housing trust fund funds for homeless services and coordination that the Housing Coalition is currently opposed to. Both of these bills are appearing to make progress. One of them is going to be heard in Senate Commerce today. That's the referendum. And then the other version of the bill in the House looks like it'll be heard in the Health and Human Services Committee next Monday. So something to keep an eye on. And then lastly, we have the zoning reform legislation. That's the sort of byproduct of the Housing Supply Study Committee. And that bill is going to be heard in Senate Commerce today. So definitely something to keep an eye on. The Housing Coalition is currently signed in as neutral on the bill. The membership of the Housing Coalition has had, I guess, some division. Some see it necessary for like the further development of affordable housing, and others are concerned that there isn't a specific call out to affordable housing. And that is basically it. Happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Yeah, can you let us know the bill numbers?
Yeah, for sure. So the Housing Trust Fund bill, that one is SB 1465. The bill for teacherages is SB 1289. The DES homeless coordination line item increase is SB 1462. The two LIHTC bills, Representative Kano's is HB 2270, and then Representative Livingston's is HB 2318. The zoning reform is SB 1117. And then lastly, those two, the other pair, Representative Livingston's version is HB 2284. And then the resolution version is SCR 1011.
Other questions? Thoughts? Things you want to say on the record?
I have a question. I'm sorry, I couldn't find the raise my hand feature.
I saw you raise your hand.
This is Allison Cook Davis from Morrison Institute. My question was just you had mentioned that the Housing Coalition was opposed to the earmark on the Housing Trust Fund for homeless services, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So there are two pieces that cause the opposition, I suppose. One is just that the Housing Trust Fund earmark is directed to those services rather than those funds coming from essentially a different source. And then there are also aspects of like potential criminalization, a lot of language prohibiting different aspects that would be common that cause some concerns. Happy to follow up with more information if that isn't sufficient, and get back to you with the Housing Coalition's more fleshed out response.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay. I'm not going to do the dentist thing today and pull teeth, but most certainly, thank you, Dylan, for that. We're going to move. Next, we're going to move on to the Systems Flow Dashboard. Stephanie Crum, HMIS Manager at Solari, will provide a recap on the Systems Flow Dashboard. I look forward to your questions and discussion following the presentation.
All right. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Let me share my screen here real quick. All right. Can everybody see the dashboard okay?
Yes.
All right. So if this is your first time seeing this and first time accessing the dashboard, on the first page here is just the definitions of who we're talking about when we're talking about the populations on this dashboard. Some other definitions of inflow, outflow, and then of course what is including folks on this by name list and what is excluding folks on this by name list. But let's get into the details. So first overall look, again, is not a lot of changes at the surface here, still kind of just like a leveling off for both populations. Just doesn't look like a lot of change. But when we get down here to the subpopulations, they're kind of moving all over the place and in different directions. So let's talk about that for a little bit. First here for the BIPOC population, they're seeing about a 3% increase over the last month. Some of these other populations, we're seeing a drop in white non-Hispanic. Chronic continues to just kind of creep up over the last 6 months. Unsheltered is continuing to drop pretty heavily. This month, it was a 7% drop that we saw in the unsheltered population. Down here on these smaller lines, the movement doesn't seem as dramatic, but I do want to point out that the elderly population is seeing a 5% increase over the previous month. And these are staying pretty steady here. Veterans, we're continuing to align with the veteran BNL, and have an active project right now. So we may see some changes in the next month here that will more align with the veteran BNL. Youth, we didn't see too many changes here, just a nominal increase as well. But just a lot of movement within the homeless population, not just overall, it looks pretty quiet, but within the sub-pops, there's movement all over the place there. All right, let's get into our flow details real quick. So what's driving the numbers this month? And that's really a return from inactive, as you can see on this red line here. Seeing about a 7% increase over the last month of folks who are returning from inactive. And the new clients, so these are folks who are new to the system within at least the last 2 years, they are seeing a drop there. So this is mostly driven by return from inactive. One thing I really want to point out, though, and this is good stuff here, I'm glad I'm ending on a good note, is that you'll see that we have a jump here from 433 to 577 in our house numbers over last month. That is a 33% increase in 1 month of folks who were housed over the last month. The only other time we've ever hit higher was back in October of 2020, we hit 609. But this is wonderful. This is great news. And I hope that we continue to see this trend. We are continue to see trend of a drop in unknown negative exit, but I do want to caution that as the unsheltered population drops, we're going to see this drop as well, because a lot of unknown negative exits are from unsheltered and street outreach populations for just the nature of the population. So that is, I think this is what I really want to focus on here, is this 33% increase, because that's amazing. So, all right, I've talked enough. Open it up for questions for anyone or anything else you want to look at again.
Stephanie, can you go back to the previous
Mm-hmm.
slide? The previous one. Okay, so I know that there's work that's taking place, like when I look at like with what CBI has done with their Rio Fresco, I think that's what they named it, shelter. And so, like, yes, there's placements that were happening based off of the enhanced cleanups with the city of Phoenix, things of that nature. But at the same time, like, I know what my eyes tell me, and my eyes don't look like the graph. And so my question is, like, is there a particular day or point in time? Like, when do they take that number? And like, is it just pulled from HMIS? Or is there like how are we coming to that 1222 number? Because even like if that were the case, then roughly 80% of the county's unsheltered population is around the campus. And while I acknowledge that the population around the campus, of course, is the largest level of concentration, we know that like that's not true. It's not 80% of those that are currently unsheltered exist around 12th and Madison. Like that's almost just not possible. So how are we capturing that data that gets us to the 1222 number?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this data really comes from our active list, which is our by name list. So what we're doing is we're looking at this, we're basically pulling from our by name list on a monthly basis, these numbers, and the folks that would be included in here, especially for street outreach, these are sort of the parameters at which somebody would sort of be active on this list. So they would need to have somebody working with them, whether this be like a street outreach team, whether they be showing up in like a emergency shelter. It could be just a night-by-night weather relief shelter or a longer stay type of shelter. Those will all land somebody here onto the by name list, as well as some coordinated entries. So some folks that may be hanging out in concentrated areas, there may be a chance that they're not touching a street outreach team in this month for whatever reason. They're not coming inside to use shelter. Those are some of the ways that they would be included on this list. And if they're not touching those services for whatever reason, then they would not be considered in the active number.
So it'd be unsheltered, active in the system.
Mhm. Yes, yes.
So like what, and this is just, it's for the group. Like what troubles me about this is that we know when it comes to the point in time count, that doesn't capture a lot of people, right? You know, will the point in time count actually gets used as a weapon against the work in that sense? Because I've sat with city officials that like to say like we only have 10 people in this entire city that are, you know, experiencing homelessness, and I'm like, I saw more than 10 people driving over here, you know, on that particular day when it comes to like municipalities that have said such things. And so we miss it when it comes to that. This is around those that are active. And so then it's like, well, who's like really like we don't capture the actual number in that case, right? Like we could say that we're doing a great job of engaging those that are, and I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox stuff today. But like we could say we're doing a great job of engaging those that are unsheltered in the system. Meanwhile, we could have, you know, this epic amount of people that are unsheltered that are not touching the system, and we wouldn't know it because we're not capturing that number. And Stephanie, this is nothing against you because you just report the numbers. I just think that like that's a thing that we have to be aware of, and like we have to really think through and make sure that we're not drinking our own tea. You know, we're the COC, we're not Lipton. And so we have to make sure that we're not drinking our own tea when it comes to this and patting ourselves on the back. Yes, for that house number, that's great. But we have to make sure we're not patting ourselves on the back and missing where there's an issue and we don't see it because our numbers look like we're dropping. And again, I still say there's amazing work that's taking place. I'm off my soapbox now, sorry. For the group, what questions do you have about the numbers? Questions, thoughts, concerns, comments?
Hi, Chairman Cruz. This is Jim.
Jim, go ahead.
Kind of a follow-up to your comments is that, yeah, you see, on that same chart, the purple line, that is a significant drop. And so I'm thinking as a layperson, wow, that's a significant drop. So having a handy reason or to summarize why the drop is happening, I think would be very helpful. And then to the second graph about the increase in the number of number of people that are housed, I think that would be a good piece of information to share as to where they're going, who's providing that shelter, those homes.
Yeah, because was there an infusion of stock or what took place? Because my understanding is that you know, from a housing match standpoint, like inventory is full. So where do folks get housed at, or what happened with that? Do we know? Anybody on the call? No?
I can speak to it.
Yes, Marcy.
We've seen an uptick through threshold, pad mission, landlord incentives in bringing on more inventory for our community. And I mean, I know my team has been working furiously, and we've housed like over 100 people for the past several months. So we're seeing a definite incline in housing and matching people to units. We're also taking in more referrals. So hopefully we're shortening that time of homelessness.
Yes.
And with the clinical providers, clinical supports and service providers navigating the clients to housing, we're seeing a much better outcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Jim. I want to second that. I think it would, and Marcy, I appreciate that explanation because it's great to see some connection between what happened, what intervened, and why potentially what correlations there are between the data and the things that are happening, right? So if you're seeing an uptick in onboarding new landlords, that can potentially explain why the data is doing what it's doing.
Yes.
When I look at the unsheltered number, it's dropped 800 basically since June. And that's like a substantial drop, especially as the problematic point in time count has shown, we've been increasing year over year forever, like since at least 2014. So to see it start to significantly drop like that makes me want to know, kind of similar to Jim's question, where are people going? It's one thing if they're going into housing. It's another thing if they're going into shelter. And the reason why, just because I know I'm in the data analytics work group, and we're starting to finally get a little bit of breakthrough on what the data is saying. And I'm probably premature because I'm not the data guy like some of the other cats on the call. They're really, really sharp. So I'm going to give you a premature finding, which is that there clearly is an issue with emergency shelter, not to blame any given emergency shelter, but the returns to homelessness in our community seem to be very much on an outsized sense coming from emergency shelter. So then if people are moving from unsheltered to shelter, that's not necessarily the kind of movement that's going to benefit our system as a whole if the shelter is part of potentially the problem from just a pure number standpoint. So, where are people moving to is the question. It's one thing, like I said, if they're moving into housing, super positive, then we need to talk about how do we retain people into housing better. If they're moving into shelter, we need to be like, hey, let's take a really hard look at shelter because we're moving more people into our most problematic place. So yeah, it's all to kind of second what Jim's saying. And also to say, do we know if there has been an uptick in the same period of time in people entering shelter? And Stephanie, I guess that's kind of a question for you, if you know that to be the case.
Yeah, no, those are great questions. And my team is actually working on looking into a few of these things right now. Some of the work groups, the chronic work group and the street outreach collaborative, we have data quests for both of those data requests. Sorry, not data quests. I mean, they are kind of quests for information, right? For both of those groups right now. One, we are looking at those who are returning from inactive. Where did they last appear at before they fell off? And then where are they returning to? So we're going to be deep diving into that here in the next week or two. And then also continuing to investigate this unsheltered drop. We did look at it in the fall, and the initial drop we know was from some grant consolidations and closings. But as it continues to drop, I can't imagine that that's continually the answer. So we're going to be taking another look at that and looking at those very questions. So hopefully in the next month or so, we'll have better answers as to what's going on in the unsheltered drop, and then also with our return from inactives. Where are they coming from and where are they returning to?
Yeah, because not being scientific, just acknowledging that if you have a drop of 800 people across the county, but we haven't had an increase of 800 beds, and typically inflow outpaces outflow, then that number, there's something not, there's just, there's more than meets the eye in that number, right? Because I think since the summer, we've maybe, has anything else opened besides the CBI shelter? Since June? So I don't think anything's open since then. And from an HSC standpoint, we've increased our beds by like 50. So that's 200 combined, I think. I don't know, because I think the CBI shelter, which just ramped up to their number of like 100 to 150, like they just did that last month. So we're not talking about a huge number. So yeah, the question becomes like, where are people going at a time that the numbers usually are going up? So I'm curious about that. Haley, I would love it. And this is my ask. And if people agree, then we can go with it. But Haley, I would love it if like maybe we could get a presentation next month from the Outreach Collaborative, so we can ask some of these questions, because I think like this is a question that keeps coming up. And I don't think it's fair that Stephanie has to come and like answer questions for who she's collecting data from. If they can just come and speak to us about what they're seeing and everything else, I think that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, and we'll definitely, a lot of these answers and things that we're talking about right now will also be included in the quarterly trends report when that comes out. Like we share that with MAG and their team to put together sort of a narrative as to what you're seeing, and that comes out quarterly.
Okay, thank you. So in queue online, where I'm gonna go is to, and I'm sorry because I didn't see because we didn't have you up. So I'm gonna go with Laura first because I saw her hand first, and then I'm gonna go to Vanessa just because they haven't spoken yet, Jim, and then we'll go to Jim, and then Emily Walsh. Okay, so Laura, or did you?
No,
I saw your
thank
but
you.
do you still want to go?
Oh, I do. I just wanted to put my hand down so I didn't forget later. So my question kind of goes along with what Richard was saying. Obviously, we're seeing a lot more homeless on the street. My question is, I know that the outreach teams, when they're engaging individuals, are now doing the GPS. Is there a way to know what areas of town are actually not covered by street outreach and where we're seeing the majority of folks connecting with street outreach teams? Because I agree with Richard. I'm concerned that we're seeing such a huge drop, but I don't know that that's realistic. And are we missing people on the street to really accurately reflect what we're seeing on visually?
Let me comment on that. I think if we have the outreach collaborative come, they, I think, should be able to speak to that. It's been a minute since I've been in those meetings. My team attends, and I know part of what they were trying to do was make sure that they had coverage geographically and in terms of time, and kind of seeing what each of the providers in the outreach collaborative, like what, times and locations they were covering, and then find the gaps. It's been a while since I've checked in on that. I would assume that some work had been done and they had made some progress on that. But yeah, that is something that if we're going to ask them to come, we should ask them to speak to that as well. Yes.
Nate, Mag staff here. We actually mapped every single outreach team in the region. We have 7 teams that are covering the entire area, and we have a total of, I think, 23 teams that answered this survey. Those are all mapped in hand up. If you all are looking for that link and want to know where outreach teams are, feel free to reach out to Mag staff and we can get hand up over to you. On top of that, we do, as Laura mentioned, map outreach contacts every single week through the outreach viewer. If you are interested in seeing that outreach viewer, feel free to also reach out to Mag staff. It does show kind of contacts throughout the region. I have not looked at this in the last 2 days, but as of 2 days ago, we had over 600 outreach contacts across the region. So that obviously isn't everybody, because we have 1,222 outreach contacts that are getting pulled in. So we're continuing to train outreach staff on the best ways to use that, how to pull in, how to quickly drop your latitude and longitude correctly. And Michelle from our staff follows up with teams when they kind of map something that doesn't necessarily make sense, whether that's a point kind of out in the middle of nowhere, to make sure that we're entering those latitude and longitude correctly and continuing to provide that training as well.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you. Vanessa?
I like the idea of having the outreach collaborative come talk to us about this specific trend that we're seeing. And maybe Mag staff can also give a little, pull up those tools that you're mentioning, Katie, so that we're all aware and informed on how to use those tools. I think that would be very helpful for the next meeting. My other concern is in the updates that we received from the Coordinated Entry Committee, we see that there's a 5-week wait for Family Housing Hub. I don't know if the Human Service Campus provided their wait time for shelter, or if that's just a more complicated data point there, but I would like to see that too. But yeah, I think what we're seeing here kind of concerns me. Does that mean that we're touching less people every single month? Because we know it's not a matter of less people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So yeah, I think it obviously a lot of committee members are concerned, and I would love to see that on the agenda next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. What I'll say to that is so I don't want to say that there isn't a wait, but it is, we are putting people in every day at the Human Services Campus. I can get those numbers for you though. like specifically and like what that looks like. In addition to that, we are having a conversation around what does it look like to convene all of the single adult shelters and do a better referral process, not a wait list. It cannot turn into a wait list because we do not want to have the system be of one where now singles also are in a space of having to wait 3, 4, 5 weeks to get into shelter. So yeah, but also like from the single side, we also have overflow shelter and things of that nature. So like that also helps to get people in some way, shape, or form over the course of that particular night. My next person was Emily, then I go to Jim, and then we'll close it out with Allison.
I think it's Richard Cruz. I was just going to say that I feel like a lot of this data too is kind of seasonal. So I know just from looking at our public health side at Maricopa County that we've seen a really high increase in people experiencing homelessness in the summer. And I think this data kind of reflects that in the sense that, like, right, if we're only counting people that are touching the system in that last little bit, then that really makes sense. But I know one of the concerns with public health right now is that this last summer, we had a really large increase in people experiencing homelessness deaths related to heat. And so that's really a big concern for us right now. But I think, yeah, kind of just figuring out where these people are going, in those winter months would be really beneficial.
Thank you, Emily. Tim.
Chairman Cruz, to your question about, made me think about something else when you asked, well, maybe something happened. There was an event, there was some activity, and I'm kind of a history nut. So I was thinking, is there any way that is there like an overlay of significant milestones that have happened that would impact changes, like shelter, X number of beds opens XYZ. And maybe that would help a little bit in providing some specificity as to things that are happening along this timeline.
I like that, Jim. Yeah, let's do something with that, because I think that would be helpful for us to be able to look at. I will say that I'm going to, at some point in the very near future, ask for us to do another data walk like we did before, but asking different questions in the data walk, because I think those are the types of things that we need to be able to look at, Jim, when it comes to what has caused drops over time. Like when we look at, like if I'm looking at the unsheltered counts from 2018 back, like when we've had these particular drops, these steep drops, what was it that created those steep drops, right? When we have increases, what's created those steep increases, right? What are the particular events? There's a lot of history that exists on the, with folks that are on the committee that can speak to some of those things. And we also have to make sure that history is not lost as we continue to move on in the work. Because quite often that is what's happening, where we're losing a lot of the institutional memory around how these things have happened, so that we don't know what those best practices were that created these things, and then we start reinventing wheels that don't need to be reinvented. Sometimes we need to go back to what worked in the past. So thank you for that, Jim.
Oh, and I'm sorry, one more add on to Emily's point about the summer months. Maybe shading the summer months in the timeline, so we can, it's the summertime, and we can maybe see something go up or something go down in some sort of time frame or timeline.
To be able to look at it. I know, like, Stephanie, you're like, yes, we can follow the line.
Yeah.
And the line will tell us like what month it was and like where the data was, but it's like to be able to look at it even in this iteration and say like, okay, we can just look at it and tell this is when that was. Could be helpful. Like, it's just approaching the data in a different way. I've got to move, so I'm going to go to Allison because I took chairman's privilege and went over. So Allison, go ahead.
I just wanted to maybe suggest one of the things that sort of occurred to me when you were talking more broadly about sort of like that the numbers don't seem to reflect what's happening sort of on the ground, is that it might be, and Kitty did like sort of speak to this a little bit, but taking, like the sort of like maybe outreach staffing and having that sort of side by side with the data so that we could sort of better understand where there may be gaps, right? There may just be fewer people that are able to get out there, and it's a lot of space to cover across Maricopa County, and to provide the services and be sort of collecting that data. And it's sort of my understanding from the number of inquiries that we've gotten in Morrison that staffing levels for public service jobs have been challenging. So this may be, something that is sort of ongoing, but it might be helpful to kind of have the numbers in addition to these sort of counts to help us better understand that there may be more people missed if we're losing more outreach people and that sort of thing.
Certainly. Thank you for that, Allison. And not for this necessarily for this meeting, but I would love it if, brilliant minds can come together and think through what do we need to do to address the staffing issue. Because if, again, similar to housing, if we don't have proper inflow, then we're going to continue to have problems when it comes to getting our outcomes. And so that is a larger thing that we need to put brains together on to figure it out. Now, I'm going to move on to the next agenda item. I'm so excited about this agenda item. I really am. It's the election of the co-chair. Yes. So as the new year begins and a co-chair vacancy has occurred, there's a need to elect a new co-chair. Members will discuss submitted letters of intent and approve a new co-chair. Is it going to be Haley or is it going to be Dylan?
It's me.
Okay, Haley. I didn't know because you're convalescing. Oh, that I got real churchy. You're at home. So Haley will now share information regarding the letters of intent received.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, everybody. I am also super excited about this. We received one letter of intent from none other than our own Nathan Smith. He brings experience with strategic planning and execution, data analytics, team building, experience with the homeless systems, behavioral health administration, and executive leadership, which are all excellent qualities to bring to a chair. We're really excited. I know this is maybe putting him a little bit on the spot, but I don't know, Nathan, if you want to share any additional information about why you're a good fit. No pressure, though.
Well, thank you very much. It's truly an honor to be appointed to the co-chair seat, support Richard and what we're trying to do here. I just think that the committee has a ton of potential. And I think that as I've sat here for the last few meetings, it would be nice to figure out what our direction really should be and really home in on what exactly we want to do. And I think I can ask enough of the right and some of the wrong questions to help us get there. And I'm not short on energy, so I'll push and work to get there. And I just think more than anything, this stuff matters. We are the people who I see you all in so many different settings, and people are talking about doing great work, very capable minds, very capable agencies. And I see so many of us gathered together in this call. So again, the potential is there, and I just want to support Richard and the committee in achieving that potential.
Awesome. So that being said, are there comments or discussion from the committee? Okay, so I'm going to move this. Awesome. So can I have a motion to approve Nathan Smith as co-chair?
Vanessa Carthel, I motion to approve.
It has been moved. Is there a second?
I will second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Amazing. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none. For committee members in the room, we will do a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Those opposed say nay. Since there were none, for members joining remotely, I told you I was going to move it. I will ask Haley to proceed with the roll call vote. Please indicate clearly how you vote, stating yay or nay after your name is called.
Thank you. I just actually had one question before we move into that. Nathan, did you vote or did you abstain?
I vote. I abstain. Yeah, no, I abstain.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that's on the record. I know you're in the room, so just wanted to clarify that. So now I will move into the rest of the votes. Don Bogart?
Yay.
Vanessa Carthel?
Yay.
Allison Cook Davis?
Yay.
Callie Lamers for Aaron Cowan Hay?
Yay.
Jessica Cruz?
Yay.
Nicole Gibson?
Yay.
Anne Marie Johnston?
Yay.
Jim McPherson?
Aye.
Jen Page?
Yay.
Gerardo Pena? Aaron Rain? Ty Rosensteel,
Yay.
Patty Scott Lopez,
Yay.
Sarah Sims, Laura Scott Nicky,
Yay.
Michelle Stokes,
Yay.
Christopher Wallace,
Yay.
Emily Walsh.
Yay.
Did I miss anyone? Great, the motion passes. Congratulations. Back to you, Chair Cruz.
Awesome. We have a co-chair. I'm excited. Okay, so still moving forward. The meeting schedule for the Continuum of Care Committee is currently held both in the Ironwood Room at the MAG office at 9:30 on the second Wednesday of the month, as well as virtually on Zoom. Based on feedback received at the last meeting, we would like to propose having a quarterly in-person only meeting with no virtual option. People would be able to watch, but they wouldn't be able to, like, if you weren't to attend, you'd have to be here. Are there any comments or what are your thoughts? So we do this once a quarter, which would also mean that the March meeting would be the once a quarter. Well, it could be, but that's what I'd be pushing for. And I'm just going to look at the screen because you guys are the ones that are virtual.
I'll just input. I would love to come in person. I can't guarantee it though, because I cover 3 states.
Understood.
So that would be my only comment.
Thank you very much, Laura. Other thoughts from those of you that are on the Zoom in the Zoom room? Dawn?
Could we maybe modify and just start out by twice a year?
Okay, so that's on the table.
For example, for me to come in to town just because of where I live, it literally kills almost an entire day traffic wise. So it's just, it's hard to justify all day for an hour and a half meeting.
I haven't thought about that hour and a half piece too, but we'll talk about that. I'm going to be good today, Haley. I know we've had an email about it, so I won't stir that pot yet.
Hi, it's Patty. I also have issues with the travel time, and it taking such a big chunk out of my day to travel up to Phoenix. So I would like to attend virtually.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Your thoughts?
I like the starting of the twice a year. I get the intent for the quarter. I don't know if it's just my agency, but we're still severely understaffed. So, trying to get kind of back to normal is a bit of a process for us. So just some consideration for that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to give input on this? Callie?
Yeah, I think Aaron and I are both in the same boat. We're covering multiple programs ourselves. So I think we would prefer to attend virtually. But if we do need to move to in person, I would be okay with doing it like twice a year to start out with.
Okay. Other thoughts? Then I'm going to make a proposal.
I would just like to say I'm fine with being there in person. I'm only not there in person today because I've just avoided downtown for the Super Bowl. But most of the time I'm happy to come in person. It's obviously very easy for me because I work at Morrison, which is almost across the street from MAG. So the commute is not a problem at all. But I also understand the sort of need to have the kind of hybrid for people who are coming from far distances and so forth. So just putting that out there.
Yes. Vanessa?
I think that it's we can come to a middle ground, but I think it's important to take a step forward and meeting in person just so that we can get some more interaction in person. It's much easier to have those really valuable conversations and input from everyone on the committee when we're in person and when we know each other. So I think it's really important, but maybe we ease into it, and I think that's okay. But yeah, I just wanted to put out a voice for the importance of meeting in person.
Thank you, Vanessa. So this is what I'm going to, this is my proposal, right? Wait, go ahead, Michelle.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I agree that we should ease into it. It's, you know, it's difficult for some folks right now. And I'm in one of those boats. So that's my comment.
So I believe in being reasonable. And so in being reasonable, this is what I'm hearing. Okay. Because there is a both and in this space that could potentially result in more than a quarterly thing. So if we were to have, since what's been put out there and people have talked about, like it's difficult for them. And I respect that. Like I live in South Phoenix, so it's nothing for me. And I work downtown, so it's also nothing for me, right? To come up. And so I recognize the privilege that I have in that. If we do twice a year, to say like there's an in-person meeting twice a year. I mean, no, hold on. Let me say this right. There's a mandatory in-person meeting twice a year. I am still going to encourage everybody to come to be in person as much as they can. So like that's still an encouragement that's going to happen. So like we can have these chairs full more than just quarterly in that regard, while respecting what people have going on in their work. Many of, I want to echo what Vanessa said. So like Vanessa's going to give a presentation in a little bit, but like when we had this conversation on Friday, I think it was Friday last week, right? There were lots of crickets on the conversation, and then we got into like a good rhythm, but there were lots of crickets at various times in the conversation that I don't think happen when we're all in the room, because like we're staring at each other and it gets uncomfortable. So somebody says something in that regard, right? And so like I really want to encourage folks that if you can come in person, to please come in person. If you can't because of travel, staffing, etc., I also understand that. And then in addition to that, there's just the piece where we acknowledge, and I say it because I do it too, a lot of people are Zoom cheaters. And what that means is like you're on 4 different or 3 different meetings, right? You're doing the reports that are due later in the day. You're doing all of these other things during this meeting because you can, because that's the beauty of Zoom, right? But then that means that we're only giving part of our attention to this work. And I'm holding myself accountable because I cheat on Zoom too. Like I'm not a player, I just Zoom a lot. And so from that context, like I just want to say like, that's my encouragement. So where we can have synergy on this is we need to approve the schedule. I'd like for us to say like 2 times a year, we'll do a mandatory. This way we're easing into it. We're doing, so like in June and December, like we can do it every 6 months or something like that. Or we could do it still like March and October, because those kind of like bookend. Yeah, like do like a March and October situation. But yeah, I need a motion to approve the schedule. And Haley's about to say something. Go
Yes,
ahead.
I was just going to jump in. Since this is a little different than what we had initially discussed, we can always put a pin in this voting and discuss it further next meeting. Since it sounds like quarterly is not really an option that everybody is thinking about, thinking more on a twice a year basis. So if we want to table the voting for now, we can definitely revisit it next month. So I want to put that out there.
March is okay. Can I have okay, because you said we have to vote on it when it comes to making it mandatory, right?
Correct. Yes.
Can we say, and then that then like at least that March would be a mandatory in-person meeting, and then like at that time, like we could decide like, okay, like we don't do this again until October, but we could do that, right? Like I could call for that motion.
Yes, we can definitely do that. I do want to caution you though, with the size of our committee, we have to have 12 people in person or we cannot have a meeting. We will not reach quorum. So that is also something to consider. If we don't have guaranteed 12 people committing to coming in March, then I don't think we should move forward with in-person meetings, because we won't be able to hold it. And then we'd have to bump our entire March agenda to April and so on and so forth for the rest of the year. So definitely want everybody to consider that too before making any decisions.
Okay. Dawn.
Thank you, Chair Cruz. I would really, just personally, be really uncomfortable with the word mandatory. Because if I have to, I just received an email right now that one of our students passed. And if I had to choose between going to the school and going to this meeting, there's no choice. But I could maybe go next month. So if there's any way to say something like encourage members to attend 2 meetings in person per year. The great thing, I understand what you're saying about cheating and Zoom, but to be honest, this has allowed me to participate in more meetings and discussions because of the flexibility of not having to travel all over the place. So that's the only thing to keep in mind, I would ask.
Thank you for that, Don, and I'm sorry for your loss and for the students at that school that are experiencing the loss from that student. So keeping what Haley said in mind, keeping what everybody said in mind, and the mandatory nature of it, and it puts us in a space. I want to table it, but I am still going to ask. I'm strongly going to encourage folks that in the month of March to be in the place to be, which is around this table. Those that do not have the ability to come, whether that is because of work commitments, various other things. Like I said, I'm reasonable, I understand. Then we'll see you on the screen, and that's okay, because we'll see you on the screen, and then we don't have issues around quorum and whatnot, and we'll continue to flesh this out and think about it. But definitely, I'm not going to call for a motion at this time, and instead I'm just going to strongly encourage people to be in the room in March. Does that work for everybody? Like, I get some thumbs up. Okay, cool. Okay. Yes, Marcy.
Is there any way to possibly, I understand the time constraints as well. Our organization is client facing, so I have lots of things going on as well. But would there be a way to coordinate this along with, and time it along with some of the work groups, some of the subcommittees where, we could have this and then go into breakout sessions with our work groups and actually meet with them in person so that it becomes more of an event twice a year where we're actually face to face with some of those subcommittees? Just a thought.
I like that. So let's talk about that. Let's flesh that out more, because I think that's good. And I saw some nods in the room and whatnot. And I think that would be good. So let's give that some thought, and we'll talk about that next month's meeting and figure something else out with that so that we can really have a meaty time when we decide to move that way. Okay, awesome. Okay. So I'm not too far behind though. So this is good. This is good. Only 4 minutes behind. No, I am totally behind because I'm supposed to be done with this next agenda item 4 minutes ago. So community-based performance standards are in development, which aim to provide data benchmarks for program operations. Dylan will now share information on the program standards criteria. Go ahead, Dylan.
Thank you, co-chair. I'll try and be super brief. Basically, we've heard a lot from this committee as well as some of the other committees in the COC, that there's a real need and desire to further contextualize the system performance measures and how all of our providers are performing. And so as a result of that, we're looking to develop these standards community-wide, so we can have a better understanding of, what areas are we working on that could use more attention. How can providers contextualize their own performance to the system as a whole? So we're bringing this to you today as a super early draft here in the first steps, just focusing on that far left area on the screen, all the criteria. All of these are primarily derived from the system performance measures themselves. A lot of them like feed into those larger categories. So ultimately, I will leave it at that to see if you all have any feedback from looking at it. But ultimately, we're looking for making sure that these criteria like align with community priorities, making sure they align with the system performance measures, and also making sure that they're impactful, that these criteria are actually something that, the community is interested in tracking, and that looking at these numbers will make a difference. So I'll leave it at that. Please feel free to share any comments either right now or later on via email if you want to look at it. This is provided in the packet.
Thank you, Dylan. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious if all of these are like currently being tracked. I look at a couple of them, connection to services, percentage of engaged persons connected to appropriate services, or case management ratio of available case managers for every program participant. And I don't tend to interact with that data at a systems level. I don't hear it talked about very often. Are we tracking those, or are some of these on the table for proposal to start tracking?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Nathan. So basically, all but I think there are 2 criteria that aren't currently in HMIS, and that's the grant spend down, the fund utilization up there, and then one other one. Which one is that? Oh, and also the housing first criteria. But yes, everything else is tracked, and I guess one thing I will mention is that along those lines, that data is currently being looked at, and we'll include that in the next time that we bring this to the committee. Should be next month in March. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
This is Nicole. I do have a question. Could you just clarify for me on what we're considering to be bridge? Because I know there's a lot of kind of different definitions of that.
Yeah, great question, Nicole. Thank you so much. So obviously there isn't, right, like a very standard definition for all of these shelters. And that's also something that can be worked out in the future as we look at how we're categorizing each of these shelters. But we have a preliminary list. That's something else that we can discuss further as time goes on and these develop.
Dylan, can I add on to that really quick too? I think, Nicole, one of the things that Dylan is really pulling into is we kind of have these booked out by overflow versus traditional and bridge, but if there is outliers, does that mean that they really should be in a different category? And so as he's pulling that data kind of by shelter, that can help start grouping too, and then having conversations with shelters to say, does this really fit? What does bridge mean versus traditional? And then kind of pulling that thread all the way through to community best practices and coming back to you as the committee to say, what is the best practice of an overflow shelter compared to a traditional, compared to a bridge? Is there different levels of case management support at kind of all of these different things, right? Like an overflow shelter may only have no case management or very little case management versus a bridge shelter is we are literally moving you into housing, whether that is a housing case manager who's supporting you or somebody in the shelter. So I think all of that to say definitely more to come, but this is kind of the first step in trying to tease those out instead of just kind of saying all of our shelters look exactly the same.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? And this is good. I encourage you, if you are not looking at the packet, to look at the packet so you can see the full list. It's more extensive than what's on the screen. And thank you for your questions and concerns. Okay, so at our last.
Hey, Richard, I'm sorry. I have one additional question.
Go ahead.
On income growth annually, when the average length of time for emergency shelter or bridge is 120 days, how can you quantify income growth annually when it says over the past year?
Thank you, Laura. That is definitely a great point. A lot of these criteria may have adjustments based on like the individual, right? So thank you for bringing that to my attention. We'll look at that further.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any others? Okay, so we have time exactly for the last two presentations. At our last COC committee meeting, members requested a presentation of the work being done at the Arizona Department of Education's Homeless Education Program. Rita Rodriguez, the State Homeless Education Program Coordinator, and Sarah Sims, the Special Populations Coordinator for Phoenix Elementary School District number 1, will provide information about this program. If you're talking, you're still on mute.
Good morning. Sarah is going to start the presentation, but I'll begin by just introducing myself. My name is Rita Rodriguez, and I am the State Coordinator for Homeless Education at the Department of Education. And a little bit of my background, I do have about 10 years experience as a homeless liaison in the East Valley. And over that time, I've developed great partnerships with a lot of the individuals I see on this call right now. So it's great to see everybody again. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to do the presentation, but I'll be here to answer any questions as needed. Sarah, I don't know if you're speaking, but we can't hear you.
Yeah.
I may suggest that while Sarah is figuring out the technical part of whatever is happening, maybe we can jump into Vanessa's presentation and then come back to this one.
So let's do that. Decreasing returns to homelessness was identified as part of the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Systems performance measures. In order to accomplish this goal, the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Committee formed a work group to increase connections to other systems of care. Vanessa from ABC Housing will now provide an update on the work group.
Hello all, just going to be really quick here. We wanted to bring to the committee what we had talked about as far as the direction of this work group, and wanted to get the input from the committee members as to, do you think we're on the right track? Do you want us to go a different way? So I'll go ahead and get started with that if you want to go to the next slide. So what is our mission? Generally, the charge of the committee for this work group has been to connect with other systems of care that either refer into our system or work alongside us with individuals and families experiencing homelessness, really to identify where do we need better connections or where's there not a connection at all and we need to establish one. So we're talking about other systems of care that include schools, justice system, healthcare, all and everything that connects with homelessness, which is everything, because everyone needs housing. But this is our general foundation of this work group. Next. So this was our brainstorming session when we met. There was a lot of different ideas put forth of okay, this is what we want to do, but how are we going to accomplish that? What are our deliverables? So I won't read all of this to you, but you can see that there are different ideas out here. And I wanted you all to have access to that, just so that if there's something, the next slide, I'm going to give you our recommendation of where we want to hone in on. But if there's anything on this page that you see that we didn't, or that we're not focusing on, please let us know. We talked about bringing new partners to the committee. What are the gaps? What are advocacy efforts that could be in place? But to get started, right, to get us off on the right foot, this is what our recommendation is to the committee. So we want to focus on inviting other systems to present at the COC committee or to serve as a committee member. I know that there in the last recruitment, there was a look at what systems of care are missing from our committee. We want to look at that again and see if there's a way for the work group members or other committee members to source from their own connections who are from different systems who are interested in being a part of the solution of ending homelessness. And then also just inviting them to give us more information about that. Like today, we're going to learn about the schools and what are some other systems that we want to learn more about. And once we learn about them, then we know, okay, where can those connections be made? The second is we need more information, right? We want to be informed in the direction forward. So should we survey direct service providers? They're the ones doing the work. They know what systems their participants are interacting with. Are there any barriers that they're seeing or solutions that they have used that work well? And we did get a suggestion that maybe a listening session's a little bit better because surveys, we know that people get busy and can easily forget about that. So maybe a listening session might be better. Then also conference presentations with other systems that recently learned, that Mercy Care is having a really neat conference coming up. There's other systems that have wonderful presentations. We should be at the table. We should be there educating our partners about the housing service system and really how to refer people to our system and how to help advocate for them. Then the last thing here, or tangible deliverable, is a one pager of the COC committee. What do we do? Who is involved in this work and what is our mission? And we're hoping that by putting together a one pager for the work that we do, that once we do start connecting to X system, that we can then create a one pager for theirs that we can distribute to providers and help to create those partnerships. So I'll leave it at that and ask for any feedback on how you feel about this direction. Do you think that these 4 points are the right way to go? Is subtract, add, adjust? Please let me know. Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Can I see the sidebar so I can see if there's anybody who raised their hand? Thank you. Thank you very much, Vanessa, for this presentation. What questions do people have or thoughts?
So if I may. Jessica Cruz here. I just really think that I have just a minute before there's an alarm that's going to go off behind me. So, but I just want to say real quick, the first point is super, super important. And we need the committee's help to think of who's not at the table. And I know that I've heard Richard say this before, but there's so many people that interact with homeless families, homeless children, homeless individuals, experiencing homelessness. And so just to be more cohesive, work together, it really requires us thinking outside of who we already have to bring these people to the table so we can learn and we can, also share our knowledge and hopefully just make a stronger system.
Thank you, Jessica. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll share. I think, so first of all, Vanessa, thank you for putting this together and the work you're doing. Honestly, it's very encouraging to see this. So I appreciate the work that's being done. I think I think our goal is probably even one step further than what we have here. So to your point of maybe something to consider adding, the goal is actually to facilitate stronger connections between the systems of care. So in all of these things will lead into that, but I just want to make sure that we keep our eye focused on, at the end of this, we're going to have to do some work to actually facilitate connections between these systems so that people don't fall through the cracks. So that's ultimately the goal. And that should kind of guide the direction of our conversations. And then another thing on the previous slide, he called out specifically discharge planning with hospitals. And I realized obviously it's a brainstorming it's a slide about brainstorming. And that hospital discharge planning, to me, represents other kinds of systems from which people are being discharged, and the need for planning there. Criminal justice system discharge planning is probably going to require a whole lot of like advocacy and a bunch of input, a ton of conversations. So it's no small thing, and yet it could have a pretty big impact. I hear all the time in my agency about how many people are we just can't keep them because they just drop them off in the streets, and it's recently gotten worse again. So, so just, yeah, as we called that one out specifically to be mindful of others like hospitals that we want to do some discharge planning around as well. But yeah, no, this is among the most encouraging things that we're doing. So I appreciate it for me personally.
Thank you. Other pieces? Anyone else? Okay, so because of the interest of time, thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for this presentation. I look forward to the next steps of the committee. I think that you all got enough feedback to know like where you want to move next. Do we have Sarah ready with the presentation?
I don't think that Sarah's going to be able to because her sound is not cooperating, but I believe Haley has the presentation and we can move through the slides and I'll go ahead and take care of it.
Okay.
Haley, can you confirm if you have the presentation? Are you going to move through it for me?
Our person who's in the room will be doing that for us.
Awesome.
So.
Thank you so much. Okay, so as I mentioned, my name is Rita Rodriguez. I'm representing the Arizona Department of Education, Homeless Education Program. And just to speak to the conversation that took place before, it is absolutely critical for us to join forces so that we're sharing information to better serve our homeless population. And in my role, more specifically, homeless children and youth that are enrolled in school and not enrolled in school. So what my goal is today is to provide you with an overview of what McKinney-Vento looks like and how we can partner together. Next slide. To begin with, just to kind of clarify, within every single school district or charter school, there is an appointed homeless liaison.
So, okay, so here's a question. Is she back or no? Yes. Okay. So Rita, like I have a question for you all. We could go with it, or would you guys like to do it next month? Because I see like the technical difficulties and I don't want you to be shortchanged in what you're presenting. That's if your audio is working for you right now. Okay, so what, I want to respect the work that you all put in to creating this presentation and wanting to give this time to us with that. So I'm going to ask that we move it to February's, well, we're in February, that we move it to March's agenda so that this way you guys can have the full depth and breadth of your presentation. Okay, everybody cool with that? Just thumbs up, cool, okay. So moving on, we're at the end. So now, as far as future agenda items, do committee members have any action or discussion items for future meetings? I'm gonna say first, like I would love it if we could have a presentation by the Outreach Collaborative in the month of March. So Haley, that's on the ask, and I see lots of nodding and thumbs up and everything else. So this way they could be ready with that. Laura, I saw you raise your hand real quick. Do you have a future agenda item that you want us to cover?
No, I was just trying to get my hand down and hit the wrong reaction. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. Other future agenda items? The people want to make sure it gets covered.
Yeah, I took note of a few things that have come up here that are really interesting. So like out of these conversations, honestly, we unearthed a ton of things to work on potentially.
We do.
Too much for us to do. So we got to get pretty selective. But one of the things I heard that I thought was really neat, and I don't know what would go into this other than like, let's figure this out, is we hear these data points all the time and we don't hear about the interventions that caused. So not to get into that a whole bunch again, because we already talked about that, but I love Jim's idea of overlaying interventions and outcomes and seeing, you know, and that would take work to figure out like, who knows what's all happening. There's got to be some sort of repository of information. Somebody knows all this stuff, or some bodies. So that would be a really good one. That we didn't talk about it, but in the systems performance stuff that Stephanie was presenting, we have mentioned that the elderly number has sort of continued to rise. I noticed that that trend is continuing and we're not hearing what potentially could be behind that. I think that needs some investigation. I don't know if that's for this committee, but that's something I would throw out there. And the other, inviting other systems to present at and join the committee, I think would be good. So those are three things that I picked up on.
Thank you. Jim.
Co-Chairman Cruz, you attended the Continuum of Care board meeting a couple weeks ago. I was just wondering, did you, what were your impressions? What were your takeaways from that, from this committee's standpoint?
You're gonna put me on the spot, Jim. I appreciate you. So yes, they're in their strategic planning. There were pushes around both, you know, there was a lot of, so we went first. That was slightly at a disadvantage because we went first. But there, you know, what I took back to them both in terms of our work, as well as in terms of like what we need from the board. What I said is that I need them to lead. I need them to push. I need them to be in spaces and conversations that are uncomfortable so that, you know, they're moving in a way that we have to catch up with them. Right. That was like my primary ask of them was to do in this space, challenging them around the fact that, you know, we have these meetings and we can't just meet to meet. The people that are experiencing homelessness and in the work that we do not have the luxury of us just meeting to meet and look at each other's faces and, you know, wait till the next meeting to decide something at the next meeting around how we'll meet at the next meeting. So, you know, really encouraging them with that. And as well as to, you know, if they're going to lead and talk about equity, then equity has to be a thing. It can't just be something that, you know, well, in their strategic plan, it's informed by equity, but equity is nowhere in the document. Like that's also unacceptable. So we know that the populations, particularly people of color, are more than like criminally overrepresented by like in the work when we look at that. And so we can't not call a thing and expect something to happen with that thing. So those were my urges to the board. There was receptivity to that. They said that they plan to come to more of our meetings across the board for all of the committees. Yeah, but essentially ask them to lead and do. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Any other pieces for future meetings or questions? Okay, so now does anyone have any comments for the group before we close?
I just have one comment, Richard, if I may. There are, you guys brought up a lot of great points for things to bring to next meeting on the agenda. But I would also like to push, we can always have more work groups. That is always an option. I know I keep hearing there's an appetite for doing a lot more work through the committee and taking charge on things. And I think that is amazing. Absolutely love that. And sometimes I know in a work group, it can be a little bit easier to manage. We're not so restricted by time and all the other business that we have to attend to. So definitely, maybe consider that, especially like in the with the question of like, how do we improve staffing? It sounded like that was something maybe the committee could sort of think about. And then the overlaying of the different community events that were happening while we're seeing these numbers change. You know, there's only one Stephanie and there's only one me, so there's only so much that we can do. But that could be really great if maybe we could have a couple work group meetings for you guys to put together a timeline of the last year or 18 months or whatever time frame you decide, to have that map of events, shelter openings, what have you, and then also line that up with the information that HMIS puts together for us. So definitely just something to consider. Just wanted to throw it out there, especially if you guys are considering having these in-person meetings and then want to have additional meetings to roll into that, just to maximize your time together. So just wanted to say that, and I will also step off my soapbox.
Thank you, Haley. Much appreciated. Any other comments? So the number 1,286, that is the number of people that we know of that passed away in Maricopa County while experiencing homelessness in 2022. 1,286, which is almost triple the number of 2020 or 2021. It exceeds the number of 2020 and 2021 put together. Each of those years, which was around 551 and 557, if I remember right off the top of my head, sent shockwaves through the system. And yet, last year, 1,286 lives were lost while experiencing homelessness. And so I just want to put that number there. It's a sombering note. So like maybe I'll ask if anybody has anything uplifting they'd like to leave with. But that's the work. That's like when we look at, when we talk about, like for those of you that follow results-based accountability, results-based leadership, et cetera, one of the tools that they talked about is baselining. And so what happens if we do nothing, right? This is what happened with us still doing something. 1,286. So we have to do more. We have to figure out how we do more, and not more just to do more, but more that creates impact, because lives are being lost at alarming rates. And we know from our population that while that 1,286 individuals are the ones we know about, we know that number's higher than that because we serve in visible to us, but invisible to many systems population. Just want to sit with that for a second. Jim.
Co-Chairman Cruz. So another hat that I wear is on the statewide immunization board. And of course, you know, with the COVID vaccination, other vaccinations, you know, we know how many people have passed away from COVID. Then there's been this other study, I'm trying to remember, I can't exactly, I'll get it for you, that was done also that said there's been this excess amount of deaths not expected over the same time period, over and above COVID. So my question is anyone on this call or in public health where we can maybe look at that, the number you expressed, and see, you know, can we find out exactly what happened with those 1,286? From a public health standpoint. I'm just throwing that out. And I'll try to find that study.
Thank you, Jen. So let's reach out. Let's connect on that. Also, I know at the Action Nexus, they're looking at some of these numbers too for the issue. So they're looking at those numbers to see like where the increase is, how the increase is, how do those numbers hold out over time when we're looking at the past, you know, few years. And all of that. And like, I think like that's a really good piece for me to, like a rabbit hole for me to send them down. Emily?
I'm from public health here. I'm an epidemiologist with Maricopa County. Definitely something we're looking into because I kind of like what I was saying earlier that a lot of these deaths were heat related, or at least heat related cause. So we partner with the OME, which is the Office of the Medical Examiner, to look at all of our deaths. So definitely something we're digging into right now. So we report back when we have more information there.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna close, but just one thing I want to say is I thank each and every one of you for the amazing work that you do. The work that we do is a work of insanity because we dare to believe and to dream that we can end this thing called homelessness, and I believe it. Right? It's not just about serving those experiencing homelessness. It's not just about working with those that are experiencing homelessness, but it's about ending this social ill called homelessness. And so I thank you for the sacrifices that you all make. I thank you for the work that you do. I thank you for the, when you can't be, for some of the people that are at home, because of some of this work and its demanding nature. And I thank those people who love you and release you to this work. So thank you all. Be safe, be encouraged, don't lose the light. And I will see you hopefully in the room or on the Zoom screen next month. Thank you so much. Meeting adjourned.